The Industrial Revolution is one of the most significant and important series of events that has occurred to this planet. It has helped shape the way we live today. Over this period of time, it has grown from the fields of Britain all the way to the Bahamas. This presentation will show you how this explosion came to be. In the 12th century, England was in a feudal society that was led by King John. All of the dukes, barons, and especially the vassals were outraged by his unfair taxes. When it got too far, the barons revolted and captured London until King John agreed to sign a treaty saying that the king's power shouldn't be abused and it gave people more power to do what they wanted. This didn't apply to the vassals too much, though, so they were still upset. The vassals believed that they deserved more power. They needed this power to help orchestrate their ideas to help their farms. When doing this, they asked their supervisors, who usually said no. But one time, a baron approved an idea that a vassal had to separate the farmer's land. Before, all of the vassals worked together on a large piece of the king's land, but now they each had a small chunk of land on which they tended to themselves. Each family had a chunk, and they had to reach a certain amount of harvested crop to stay on their land. This was called enclosure. Then the vassals really started to test ideas. People made it easier to plant seeds with a Jethro tull, but the main discovery was the crop rotation. They discovered that different crops preferred different types of soil. This made their harvest go way up, so there was a lot of food in England. And with lots of food, there's lots of babies. In the next 100 years, the population doubled. Once the population grew, more and more people went to the cities. This was caused because the small chunk of family land was given to the first son. All of the other sons had to find work, so they left to be an apprentice or to practice a trade. The daughters were sent off to be married. In the cities, people were selling their products from their cottages. This was called cottage industry. Some products were shoes, cloth, pots, tools, bakeries, metalwork, bucket making, and many other things. When a skilled worker got a good reputation, he would go over to the other shops in his field and taught them how to do it like he did. Then he would get a cut of their pay. If one shop failed to bring good products or money, he would be fired. No one would go to his shop because the bigger and better shop was right there. So you had to maintain your shop well. Then workers began to make larger workplaces, most times next to rivers. So all of his workers came there to make products. These were the first factories. Shop owners were then faced with a problem: paychecks. The workers became too expensive, so owners used the rivers next to them to their advantage. These factories were now powered by water mills and fewer people. By this time, homes and factories were being warmed and powered by wood. As the demand went up, the tree quantity decreased, pressing the people to find an alternative to a power source. They found coal. Coal was pretty much everywhere underneath England. It burned 3 times longer than wood, and it was easier to transport. Coal quickly became England's #1 source of power. But a problem soon came when the coal only dug so deep into the ground. Was dug so deep in the ground. Profit motive went out into the people to find a new way to dig it from horse pumps, which only went 90 feet. A man named Thomas Newcomen made a pump that went much deeper, but it worked on steam, pressure, and coal heated the water to make the pressure, so most of the coal being pumped and dug from the ground ended up powering the machine. While all of this was happening, there was a shift of power. When the Magna Carta was decreed, it gave the king taxing rules. Later on, the habeas corpus was formed to give the people a fair trial, not just going straight to jail or to be executed. In 1689, a Bill of Rights was created to separate the king's power and to give it to a group of people who controlled lawmaking and tax issuing. This group was called Parliament, later led by Robert Walpole. Another group was formed to help solve disputes between Parliament and the king. This was called the Cabinet. This was the shift of power in England. When the power shifted from the king to the people, the church also got cut off. People were still very religious, but they didn't let it control them. Now that people had freedom from the king and the church, they started to experiment with science. A club named the Luminous Society met at night with full moon so they could talk late into the night and the moon would light their way home. Several inventions came out of this and inspired people to make inventions for practical uses like toilets, telescopes, and other steam-powered things. Two men who became inspired were Matthew Baldwin and James Watt. These men were friends due to Baldwin's wealth that he married into and James Watt's innovative mind. These two came together and started a factory that was powered by a watermill making pottery. One day, there was a drought, and Baldwin panicked. He was afraid for his business, but Watt helped him make his factory run on steam. Watt made an engine that ran on a quarter of the coal that other engines needed. The Perrien brothers were from France, stole Watt's invention, and tried to improve it with no luck. They were part of the Academy of Science in France, which was the only place where you could talk about or practice science due to France still being heavily influenced by religion. Only a few ideas came out of it due to censorship from the church and government. France also believed that there is only a certain amount of wealth in the world, while England thought that was unlimited. The majority of the money that France had went to the army or the church, with a small portion going to their navy. England, being an island, put a large portion in it to their navy. By the 1800th century, England had the largest and most powerful navy in the world. Deciding to challenge that, France and Spain put their resources together and declared war against England. The majority of this war was in the sea because it was very hard to transport an army across the English Channel at that time. The war took 7 years, and by the time it was finished, England knocked France and Spain out of the water. Having total unopposed control of the seas, merchant ships could go where they pleased, which was extremely good for the economy. This started a very important trade system. The triangle trade boosted economy and many people earned profit. The triangle trade would start in Africa, where African kings sold their people as slaves for money, cloth, guns, metal, and other supplies. Then the slaves were boarded on ships and sent to the Americas to work on plantations that supplied cash crops and materials that England and Africa didn't have. Then these supplies were sent to England to be manufactured into items that were to be sold or traded. This was the triangle trade across the Atlantic. As new products came in, people got richer. As people got richer, they showed their wealth more and more, and the number of products go up as people continuously try to outdo each other. Consumerism comes to England, and people are trying to find ways to sell their products. William Bentley and Josiah Wedgwood team up and open a showroom to display their pottery products. This works, but they don't stop there. They melt gold on the pottery and try to sell it to the Queen. She buys it, which makes others want their products. Other merchants take their lead and make shops outside of their factories. Markets are made to bring products to the people more easily, but transporting products to market becomes very difficult due to the unkept roads. Only 2/3 of the products reach the market unbroken. Since this was bad for business, Josiah Wedgwood petitioned to Parliament to make government roads, but to have tolls on these roads so that the government would make a profit. They agreed, and roads are made all over the country. Wedgwood also convinced Parliament that canals would be useful as well. Canals were made all over England as well. Canals were very effective. They cut transportation in half, could carry a much larger load, and canals were less busy. In the Industrial Revolution, workers lived in harsh conditions. In mining pits, workers were forced to work almost naked in pitch black for 12 to 14-hour days. In factories, the hours were about the same. You could lose fingers and limbs very easily. Work bosses made conditions like this to save money. They paid their employees very little as well. Workers hated these conditions, but they couldn't do anything about it because they needed to make money for food and shelter. And if they failed to meet a status quo, then they'd be replaced. Pay would keep them alive, but just barely. Still focusing on low prices, owners hired the least expensive workers available. This meant hiring young girls. Owners kept line in their workplace by force, and young girls were the least likely to fight back. They also accepted less pay. It was very hard for young girls in workplaces. In mines, they wore less clothing to avoid their clothes from being covered in dust. Wearing less clothes made them more prone to getting raped. They were abused constantly, and the little money that they made went to their brother's education. In conclusion, the Industrial Revolution was a very hard and difficult time to live in, but what came out of it helped shape the world we live in today. Other countries, like China, are going through their own industrial revolution, and this proves that the world is always changing and growing, hopefully for the better. I hope this presentation helped show you the importance and the size of the Industrial Revolution.